All right, so hey, what's up? Uh, today I wanted to talk about this book that I've been wanting to study. The first video I made on this channel, I started with this Michael Hampton book. But I feel like I started it, but then I started looking on the internet and looking on YouTube, and I feel like there is already, not that there's so much information. I might come back to this book, but I just wanted to sort of cover some art books that aren't really on the internet, or I don't really see a lot of people studying in general or talking about at all. That I feel like are cool, good books, and I feel like I want to just make my whole channel just studying all these different books, or at least talking about them and taking studies from them. But I started with this Michael Hampton book, but I feel like there's already enough content on YouTube about this book, and Michael Hampton has a YouTube channel where he like goes more into detail about a lot of stuff in this book. So I feel like that's a really good resource already. You should go to like Michael Hampton's YouTube channel and see him talking about his methodology. But a book I wanted to talk about today is this book right here by Tom Fox Draws. It's called Anatomy for Artists: Drawing Form and Pose, the ultimate guide to drawing anatomy in perspective and pose, right? So this is how the first page looks like. I wanted to talk about this book just because it's a fairly newer book. It came out last year, 2022. First copyright print. I wanted to talk about this book just because I don't really see a lot of people on YouTube making content about this book, or I see like flip throughs and I see people talking about it briefly. There's probably like one or two videos of people talking about this book briefly. And that's maybe just because it's a fairly new book. So a lot of people are just probably unaware of this book, or maybe they already have their own books, so they're not really trying to buy any new anatomy books. But me being a newer studier, I am still open to new methodology and new information. So I have this book, and I want to talk about it because there's not a lot of people talking about it. So it's like also a good opportunity to sort of make content that I can't just look up and already see. So it's by Tom Fox Draws. I think he's like a storyboard artist, and he's also just illustrator that I just see making internet content. And he sort of draws in the liking of someone like Kim Jung-gi, RIP to Kim Jung-gi. So it's like figures in sort of like unorthodox and like crazy perspectives, and the way that he draws the figures are very subtle. When you look into like the muscle groups, they aren't very delineated like a lot of other art books are. Well, anatomy books are. Like I have this Burton Hogarth book right here, and if you like look at any of his figures, it's like he doesn't leave anything out really. It's like he sort of, the way he draws the figures are, you can tell where this ends, where this starts is very clear, very delineated. But the way Tom Fox draws is sort of like everything is sort of like one piece, and I like that cohesion. Like there isn't anything taking attention away from anything else. It's sort of like you're looking at the entire figure. You're not looking at this maybe the serratus muscle is like really popping, or the obliques are maybe really nothing is really overstated, like somebody like a Hogarth would overstate all the muscles, overstate all the anatomy, which I feel like is good. But you should keep your mind open to different styles, especially when it comes to anatomy. When you're trying to form your own, you shouldn't just study one artist especially like throughout these like how to draw sort of books or whatever sketchbooks, you should be absorbing all this kind of information. Well, at least I want to. So he starts off with just the simplification, right? He goes straight into like this block, this mannequin that, that you can see he adds like the anatomy to afterwards. That's the final figure. So this is basically the underdrawing, right? He goes into less detail, like in that beginning illustration where the figure was like the figures were very subtle looking, like their musculature was very like subtle. It was like here where you can see this is sort of, even though he's saying this is too much detail right here, right? But this is sort of what he's thinking about while he's drawing, about all these, the form lines, the contour lines. He's thinking about this muscle, the hamstring, and everything. Like, but when it comes to the final form, it's a lot more subtle, right? It's more appealing. It's a lot more subtle. And I feel like, you can sort of gauge that on your own. I feel like Tom Fox, that's just how he thinks that a lot of this stuff is too much. Well, this is actually a little too much. But, you might want to go in and sort of delineate a lot more, because a lot of this can be it's just ambiguous. Like these three, like white spots, to me is like drawing like a triangle right here to these blank spots. You might not think that that's as appealing as you want it to be, so you might go in and sort of, put your own pizzazz on it. But, that's why a lot of this information isn't just like law. You should look at it like these are suggestions from this artist's taste and this artist's, appeal. So a lot of this book, the first chapter is just sort of talking about more of his thought processes and his taste when it comes to drawing a figure, like how most of the studying is going to be like this, but this final figure, this final head right here, it might be a little too, you might not want to draw exactly like that. And that's fine, because you should, whenever you're going into these drawing books, you shouldn't be trying to draw like that artist. You should be still just trying to draw it yourself. You're just trying to absorb the information that this artist is trying to give you. So he's doing a bunch of these. And this is a key thing for this book right here. Adding form with planes, right? So a lot of this book, a lot of the study, if that's something that you don't really favor when drawing figures, and here it gets very planal. It's not like, you're not going to just draw a sphere for the cranial, the cranial ball for the back of the skull, and then draw a line down it, whichever direction you want to, put the features in, and then you just sort of start blocking stuff in. You are starting with a block. You're starting with a block, and it's like you're creating planes around the block, like sort of slicing pieces off until it resembles something like a sphere, like this, right? Sort of like how he's drawn it here. It says planes help us visualize form, right? So this is what the studies that you're going to be doing are going to be looking like from this book. This is like what he's going to preach and practice to you. Are these, planes for everything. Like, see the deltoid, you would think of it like sort of like a teardrop, like a sort of like a heart shape, like wrapped around the humerus and sort of like attached to, what is that, the clavicle. You would think of it like that, but he's going to break it down into a shape where there's three planes, and then to round it off, there's going to be a slice on the top, there's going to be a slice on the side, and then the bottom side right there. So this is what, it's not going to look exactly like this, but basically most of the studies when it comes to anatomy are going to be plano in this book. And each shape should have, he says, at least 3 planes. So that's how you can, sort of determine the roundness of a cylinder, of a, cylindrical shape. He's going to break it down into planes, because even like if you think of like the inner thigh, it's not a perfect cylinder. It's sort of like it goes in, it comes back around, you see, and he's doing that here, but planally. It's like a divot in, and then it, kind of goes back around and wraps under. So yeah, but then he says everything has 3 planes, so you don't get scaly like this little gecko guy right here. So each like part of the body should, each shape that you do for anatomy, each shape that you draw when it comes to any sort of muscle, it should have 3 planes. And I like that. But in the beginning chapters of this book, it just mostly talks about sort of his thought process before going into, this is what you should be thinking about while you're drawing the figure. That's what this first chapter kind of feels like. He doesn't go straight into the anatomy part. It's sort of like, this is how you should be thinking while you're drawing, so, and then he goes into overlapping forms, what part of the body is coming towards you and what part of the body is going away. How do you determine that? Because this, you can sort of tell in this illustration right here, you can sort of tell that this is a rib cage and it's like going down, but what part is in front of which? You can't really, it just looks like all one direction, it looks sort of ambiguous. But when you put in those overlapping lines, you can sort of tell that the pelvis is pushing back and the rib cage, the thoracic cage, the iliac crest is pushing back and the thoracic cage is pushing forward, rib cage and the pelvis. So these overlapping lines is what helps you determine what is coming towards you and what is going deeper into space, right? Because even with this, you can tell that this leg is lunging forward, and this line that's overlapping, that is like the leg is dominating that overlapping line, so you can tell that the pelvis is going back. You see how it's like wrapping around whatever is in front. This leg's in front. You're gonna get that. Whatever. I'm not like an expert. I still need to go through this book, but this is sort of what I'm thinking like while just looking at this book, the beginning chapters of this book. Overlapping lines. Still talking about he brings it to like more of a silhouette, and then shows you how he throws those over, even like with the silhouette, how easily you can get confused by the position of a figure just from those simple overlapping lines, like not even just worried about anatomy, but just those lines. This one looks, it makes a little bit more sense, consistent overlap. He doesn't, even though this book is about drawing figures in perspective, it's sort of like he's assuming that you know your way a little around perspective, because when he draws the figures, it's not like you're going to be using, like, he doesn't like show you like how to draw a grid, or how to make sure how to draw like a scale to make sure that an object is behind. He does overlapping, but I'm talking about like when it comes to sizing with in perspective, he doesn't show you like, oh, this object is coming forward and this object is way back, or oh, this is how you draw a wall, or this is how you draw a window, or it's sort of like he has a grid in there. He sort of has a little section about perspective, but this isn't a perspective book. Like there could, I have a whole different book about perspective. But yeah, even like here where he goes crazy with the forms, it's all of it is because it's overlapping. That's why it, even though this kind of really doesn't make sense, the way the drawing makes sense because of how those principles that he applied, where it's like things are overlapping, correctly. Even if we were to draw this as like a silhouette, like a contour drawing, if you were to get that form and that overlap properly, then you can make anything make sense. That's what I'm thinking. I'm not saying any of this like as a person who's going through this entire book and took his Domestica class online and stuff. It's just just for me thinking right now. But I'm gonna try to make this video short. I'm trying to not make it too long. Less is more, where he talks about like the subtle figure work. Well, the subtle indications of anatomy over the figure. This is more like a splayed figure with just all the musculature just popping, and all the delineations between all the connecting points, and it's I feel like this is something that would be good for like study, but when you're trying to just do just an appealing character, this feels more complete than this does. This feels like you need to put skin on them, but I feel like this is sort of like when you're studying, and then this is how it should look when you're finished. I think this is another reason why I appreciate this book, just from looking in it, because there's not a lot of anatomy books that show you how the muscles look and then show you how the figure should look when it's finished, if that makes sense. I have a lot of anatomy books where they just show you like a splayed figure, like these, but they don't show you how it should look with skin on top, and how much of that muscle should be showing on the top, and where you should delineate things, So I feel like I appreciate this book, even though sometimes I feel like if I was to draw something like this, I'll put a little bit more in it. But I feel like these two are fine, but I kind of want to be able to gauge that whenever I'm drawing, like how much should I delineate and how much should I take away. But yeah, the first chapter of this entire book doesn't go anywhere into anatomy at all. It just talks about his methodology, him sort of like, not really focusing on gesture lines or gesture at all. It's more of a constructional anatomy, more like, like a Bridgman. It's more constructional. It's not like you do a gesture and then you sort of find the figure in that gesture. It's sort of like you start with the construction, and you just build up from there, which I also like, because I feel like gesture drawing a lot of the time, especially when you're self-teaching and you're doing it at home, it can be a bit abstract and you could get a little frustrated because you want to draw a figure, but it's like doing a lot of gesture drawings is sort of like you're doing abstract drawing, which is, you can't, I feel like it will improve your drawing in the long run, but I feel like when you're doing construction, you can really gauge like, okay, I'm drawing this and I'm drawing that, versus a gesture. It's sort of like a dance that you're drawing, or sort of like a flow. It's not any of you're not really nailing anything down. You're sort of like, it's abstract, and sometimes it can be frustrating. I think I want to get back into gesture drawing, but I just wanted to have like these building blocks, says accuracy isn't everything, talks about wedging. These are sort of like the shapes he would use for the arm, which looks alien to me, especially how I've been drawing with like cylinders and boxes for the, But yeah, I think I'm gonna cut it here because it's already 20 minutes, but I'm gonna do some videos soon on just drawing from this book. But I just wanted to talk about just the beginning chapter because I don't see anyone on YouTube talking about it at all. But yeah, maybe, next time I'll talk some more.